Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about a very important topic related to research, and that is how to review literature for your research articles, MA dissertation or PhD thesis. This part of the research is very challenging, and students often feel bogged down by the amount of studies they have to review for their projects. So in this video, I'll show you some steps that will hopefully make the literature review process easy and smooth for you. The first and the most important thing is that your review of literature should be critical and not descriptive, because descriptive summaries of reviewed literature are often rejected by supervisors, or students are asked to revise and add criticality to this section of the thesis. So you have to be very critical here. Okay, so let's begin with the definition of literature review. What is a literature review? A literature review is a critical assessment of the current state of knowledge on a topic. It's a critical assessment of the current state of knowledge on a topic with a view to researching one of the gaps in that body of knowledge. So it's all about identifying and filling those gaps in the existing literature. For example, when you review articles, it gives an overview of existing literature in a field, often identifying specific problems or issues and analyzing information from available published work on the topic with a balanced perspective. So in this example, you can see that I have underlined the keywords which show the main features of a literature review. The definition states that a literature review should be a critical assessment of the published work. So what is a critical assessment? A critical assessment is an effective review that analyzes and synthesizes the published work on a given topic. These keywords are very important when you critically review literature on your topic. It's all about analyzing the published work. It's all about assessing the existing literature. It's all about synthesizing the published work. Now, what do we mean by these three terms? Critical thinking embodies a questioning attitude towards published work on a topic. For example, you question a set of research articles. You question policy documents. You question published standards. You question case studies. And this questioning attitude embodies, or it's all about analyzing. And analyzing is selecting, differentiating, dissecting, breaking up and unpacking the existing literature. Analyzing includes consideration of the strengths and weaknesses of each article and a comparison of the articles with each other. The second important thing is assessing, and assessing is all about evaluating or making a judgment about the existing or published work. It's like questioning the value of the article. The third and the most important thing is synthesizing, which is all about integrating, combining, recasting, recognizing a new or a different arrangement. In other words, the articles are presented in a new way which offers new insights into the topic. So, in short, an effective review of literature would have these 6 elements. An effective review of literature would summarize and evaluate findings of other researchers and their work. It would compare and contrast different authors' views. It would group authors who draw similar conclusions. It would note areas where authors are in disagreement. It would highlight exemplary studies. And an effective review of literature would note or identify gaps in existing knowledge, which is the most important thing. Some scholars believe that the review of literature should also highlight the gaps and the gaps in the existing knowledge, and the researchers will address, and their studies will address those gaps. They would define and limit the problem, and then they would work on it. And that review would ensure that the researchers are avoiding duplication in their studies. And an effective review of literature will also evaluate potential research methodologies and procedures used by other researchers in their studies. They would assess the strengths and the weaknesses of those research methodologies and the methods and the tools that the researchers have used for the purpose of collecting data. I hope that you have understood the purpose of a critical review of literature. Now let's talk about defining the topic and focusing on the area that we intend to investigate. It's important to define and narrow down the topic before you critically review studies related to your topic. And here you have to consider three important things. You need to be clear about the focus of the review, because you cannot review literature on everything. So you have to be extremely focused. You have to be clear about the boundaries. You have to set boundaries, the issues to be included and the issues to be excluded, and you should have reasons for including something or excluding something. It could be useful to engage in some preliminary reading before you decide on your topic, so it will help you narrow the topic down and focus on one particular area. Right, so once you have chosen the topic and you know its boundaries, its limits, then you can start reading. Here you need to use that critical lens and start reading critically. First of all, you should organize the sequence of readings to gain an overview of the articles or the chapters before plunging into in-depth reading. Here you can read the abstracts and organize them accordingly, right? The second important thing is that you need to read research articles in a chronological order. It's very important because it will help you see how later studies build on earlier ones. You need to ask yourself what you expect to learn from each book, each chapter, or each article. Do you need this reading? You have to ask yourself. Is it really related to your topic? Which part of your research it might help with? So these are important questions that you need to ask yourself. While reading with a critical eye, you should be an active reader. You should take notes. You should interact with the text as much as possible. And that interaction will help you comprehend the text. That will enhance your understanding of the text. You should try to recreate an empirical study in your mind and ask yourself, how did the authors go about this study? Or how does it work? How could it be done differently? Why did they use these particular data collection tools, etc., etc.? So you should highlight and take notes. You should record your comments, ideas as they arise. You should think and ask questions about every section of the article that you read. You should use calculators to check calculations or numbers or data or figures or facts, which you can, wherever you can. You should use critiquing tools to guide your questioning. Now, important point is, what do we mean by a critiquing tool? A critiquing tool is a toolbox of probing questions designed to assess the quality of a research paper. It is widely used in research to support evidence-based practice, but the principle can be extended across the disciplines, and you can use this critiquing tool in social sciences as well. Many instruments are extensively validated and tested for reliability. Different tools exist for different types of studies. For example, there are different tools for case studies, and there are different tools for qualitative as well as quantitative studies. You can tailor your own list of critical questions. You can Google search and download critiquing tools from the internet in order to evaluate other people's work for the purpose of your literature review. According to Rutzman and Newton, a critiquing tool looks at 5 aspects of a research study. First, it examines the conceptualization of the study, how well it has been conceptualized. Secondly, it assesses the theoretical framework and evaluates the hypotheses. Thirdly, it looks into the design of the research and evaluates its potential strengths and weaknesses. Fourthly, it assesses the findings, their interpretations, and the discussions of the findings. And finally, a critiquing tool evaluates the summary of the research articles. So that's the purpose of a critiquing tool, and that's why it's so important for researchers to use a critiquing tool in the process of reviewing literature in a critical way. Now, let's talk about the two different types of literature review, which are very common at the graduate and postgraduate levels. There are two types, of course, a chronological and a thematic literature review. Chronological and thematic are the most popular. You should use the chronological approach if the ideas are progressing over the time. It's all about the time, the date. In such review, the sources will be discussed according to the publication date. The thematic approach will require you to take the existing knowledge according to your topic, and that must be analyzed deeply. You must review each source, including the most important and useful information, and develop themes and categories. So that's the difference between a chronological review and a thematic literature review. In order to write a chronological review, use this structure to focus on how ideas or methodology have progressed over time. Number 1, group and discuss your sources in order of their publication date. Number 2, record the research and developments in each group. Number 3, check how the field has developed over the years. And ask yourself a question: do all studies discuss a common topic, or is there a difference between them? For example, how models for treatment methods for skin cancer in children have developed over a specific period of time. If you want to use a thematic approach, you should keep these 5 tips in mind. Number 1, you need to do much more than summarizing each study. Number 2, you need to analyze existing knowledge on the topic with regard to certain important issues and make themes or develop categories. Number 3, you should draw the reader's attention to new angles or perspectives. And number 4, you should start listing citations you may include in your paper. And you may use software like NVivo for thematic analysis. People use it quite often these days. All right. Once you have identified and narrowed down the topic and critically reviewed the literature, now you need to know how to structure your review. You can do it in 2 different ways, either by organizing it according to the articles or according to the themes, as you can see on the screen. In article by article approach, researchers take an author-centric approach and essentially present a summary of the relevant articles. This method fails to synthesize the literature. You might face a problem with word count as well. In thematic arrangement, however, a literature review is concept-centric. Thus, concepts determine the organizing framework of a review. And you can see the citation. In thematic arrangement, you identify the key concepts or themes that requires a systematic approach to reading. You look at them collectively as a body of work, and you try to identify the key themes in all the articles that you review. So that's the difference between the two. One is an author-centric approach. The other one is the concept-centric approach. So the question is that how would you develop a thematic analysis for your readings? Research suggests that creating a grid or matrix will help you record all the important information from your readings. You can add a critical response to each reading or each article in the matrix. For example, here you can see an article-centric matrix. Of course, the same way you can make one for thematic arrangement as well. So here you can see 6 columns which include the detail of the article, research questions, theoretical perspective, methodology and procedures, key findings, and their critical evaluation. For critical evaluation, you can use the critiquing tool to question the various sections or aspects of the research study in hand. Once you have the matrix ready, do the analysis. For each section, summarize the relevant readings and record them in the matrix table. After that, discuss strengths and weaknesses of the material, the article, as uncovered by critical reading. Then, compare the relevant ideas, theories, views, and findings expressed in the literature, and some people call it comparative analysis of the literature. And the last thing is that you need to articulate and discuss similarities and differences between the readings, between the findings of the research articles or the studies that you review. Now, the question is that why go to these lengths? The answer is that recording the readings in this systematic fashion should allow a thematically based structure for the review to emerge. It determines the structural arrangements that you will employ in the essential step you must take in creating an effective and thorough critical review of the literature. And that thorough understanding of the review is very important, as you can see Jarrett's 2011, he states that your only guide to determining thoroughness in your own sense of knowing the literature well enough to own it. So it's very important for you to review it very carefully and thoroughly and understand each part of the literature. And so you should have command over the review of the literature. Now, structural arrangement is extremely important because key themes or concepts form sections and subsections or headings or subheadings for your literature review. It also breaks down the writing task into smaller chunks, and it's a lot more easier for you to write it down. It helps you with logical sequencing of sections, right? And you can synthesize the topic in a much easier way. It usually needs to explain the structure in the introduction when you write an introduction to the review of your literature. It gives you an idea about the chronological order of the studies. Once you have arranged all the studies in a thematic or article-centric matrix and critically evaluated them, it's time to start writing the review. And probably is the most difficult stage. On the screen you can see an example of a study that has been critically reviewed, and this study has been done by D 2005-2006. On this slide, I have highlighted the critical evaluation of a study by D as red and green. That critical commentary is in red and green. When you write your review, this is how you are going to critique the findings, as you can see in red, and the research design or methodology, you can see it in green. Okay, let's move to the next slide. You can do a comparative analysis of studies as well that you have recorded on the grid or matrix. You compare studies and highlight similarities and differences in their findings. On your screen, you can see 3 different studies and their different findings. This is how you are going to put them together in a way that gives an overall picture of the research work on a given topic. Okay. Right, so in a comparative analysis, there is a range of possible outcomes with questions that follow a widespread agreement. So you need to ask yourself, is this agreement reasonable? Has anything gone unconsidered? Secondly, you might find broad agreement with dissenting voices. So you need to ask whether this unconventional view is worthy of your attention. and how it's going to change your own thinking. Finally, there could be a widespread disagreement and you need to question it. Why is it there? For example, how have such differences arisen, and how you might make sense of the chaos? These are very important questions, especially when you do comparative analysis of your review of the literature. Now, what is a successful review of the literature? Webster and Watson answer the question. A review succeeds when it helps other scholars to make sense of the accumulated knowledge on a given topic. So at the end of your review, your reader should know what is clear and well understood, what is unclear and requires further research, and what the implications for practice are. So these are the key things that your reader should know at the end of your literature review chapter or section. Also, you can use a checklist to see if your literature review is up to the mark or it needs improvement. There are 5 key questions. Number 1, is the purpose of the review clear? Number 2, are the parameters of the review reasonable? Why are some papers included but others omitted? Number 3, are recent developments emphasized? Number 4, is the focus on the primary or the secondary sources there? Number 5, is the selected literature relevant or irrelevant? Secondly, to check if the reviewed literature has criticality, you should ask the following 7 questions. Is the review organized thematically? Is the review organized logically? Is it coherent? Is there a greater emphasis on more important issues and less emphasis on less important issues? Are research methods and designs critiqued in relation to their strengths and weaknesses or not? It's a very important question. In situations where there are conflicting or inconclusive findings, is there a discussion of the possible reasons why? Number 6, does the review contribute to the reader's understanding of the topic or research problem? The last one, is the research methodology or design congruent with the conclusion drawn from the literature review? So these are very, very important questions about the criticality of the literature review. If any one of them is unanswered or missing, that means your review of literature lacks the element of criticality. Right, so in this video presentation, we have discussed the definition of literature review and how we can write a critical review of the literature. I hope you have found it useful for your PhD or MA thesis. Thanks very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos on research. Goodbye.